Okay, welcome back to our Maya Fluids tutorial series, and in this part we're going to cover n-particle and fluid interaction. And in fact, over the next few lessons we're going to be creating something that looks somewhat like this. So you can see we've got smoke and fire, and we're using n-particles as the emitter for this particular scene. So rather than just do the traditional sort of smoke blown in the wind that you normally see in Maya, I decided to go ahead and create something a little different. It uses the same principles, of course, as creating normal smoke and fire, so you will learn how to do that as well. This just seemed a little bit more interesting, and this will also give us the opportunity to marry together n-particles, Maya fluids, and Maya's external fields, or external forces if you like, to create an effect that should give you the basics of how to marry these three different things in Maya together. So anyway, we'll start off by creating our n-particle emitter. So for those of you not familiar with n-particles, I'll keep this as simple as possible just so you can follow along. You need to make sure you're on the n-particle menu set, go up to n-particles, create n-particles, create emitter. I'll just select its options box and I'll actually reset my tool. What I want is a volume emitter. I only want, if you remember the video we just saw, you're not having thousands upon thousands of flaming meteorites falling down. We're only having a few every second, so I'll set this to 1 for now. Let's just scroll through. I will put the speed a little bit random, 0.25, so they don't all fall out a completely uniform distance from each other. And anything else I need to tweak, I'll do along the way. So if I hit apply, you should see we have our emitter created. And if I press, let's just give us a few frames to work with, say 200. And if I press play now, you'll see that we are emitting particles from our emitter. If I hit 6 for shaded view, you'll see they all come out a slightly different color. This is fine. As by the end of this sequence, we're going to have hidden these, so I'm not going to delve into the shading of them too much, as they're going to look like small fiery meteorites anyway. You're never going to see the actual n-particle itself. So what I want to do now is, we have our emitter and we have our particles. Now we need a fluid container, and we need to tell that container that these particles that are passing through it need to be treated like emitters. So each particle will actually become a separate emitter. So up here, back to the Dynamics menu set, under Fluid Effects, Create 3D Container. Now we've, during the course of this series, simply used 2D containers because they're faster. But for this we're going to need a 3D container. It's about the same as you saw last time, except the only thing here, it now has a Z resolution. So I'm going to take the standard resolution and standard size and hit apply and close. Now what we have is one n-particle emitter and one fluid container. Now it's the same again, just in 3D this time instead of 2D, but you can see here this would be the voxel shapes on the bottom grid, and they're square. So if I hit play now, nothing will happen. Our n-particles do fall through our fluid container, but they're not emitting any sort of density or heat, or that's because this is an n-particle emitter and this needs a fluid particle emitter. So what we have to do, if we bring our outliner up, I find it's easier to work with the outliner a lot of the time rather than just randomly selecting things in the viewport, because as you can see, if I play and we have a few n-particles, I can select the n-particles themselves or the emitter, and if you just randomly click in the viewport and you have a lot of things, I find it easier to work with the outliner, but that comes down to your personal preference. So what we're going to do is I'm going to select the n-particle, I'm going to select the fluid, I'm going to make sure I'm on the Dynamics menu set, Add Edit Contents, and I'm going to click Emit from Object. I'll reset this again. So I want a surface emitter because I want my heat, fire and smoke emitted from the surface of my n-particles. I actually don't want to put heat and fire in just yet. I want to deal with the density first. So I'm going to turn the fluid drop off to 0.25, and I will call this Fire B and hit apply and close. Right, now you can see under our nParticle we have a fluid emitter. You can tell it's emitter because it's got this little plus shape round circle thing on it. So if I hit play now, what you should see is when the nParticles go through the fluid container, they leave behind a trail of what looks like smoke. In fact, if I just up this to 10 instead of 1, you'll be able to see a lot clearer trail of smoke, and there we go. So another problem we have is Maya has to calculate the path of these nParticles, and at the moment they drop right through the bottom of our fluid container here. So this is not very efficient, it's not very good. The problem we're going to have is all of these nParticles fall at the same speed. So it would be very nice now if we could just say, let's see, after 2 seconds after you're born here in the emitter, you die. So they'd fall to about here and just disappear. And I'll show you how you can do that. If you go into the shape, and what you're looking for is the shading, and if we go here, no, we're not looking for the shading actually, sorry, it's the per particle attributes, of course. And if you go to lifespan, click it and just click creation expression. This will allow you to create a small script to tell these particles what they're supposed to do on their creation. So if we just Control C and Control V that, what we now have now is nParticle shape 1, which is what we have selected, our nParticle over here. We have its shape node, and the lifespan of that we can say equals 2, which will be 2 seconds. And now if I hit create and we rewind and play, you'll still see that they just live forever. This is because we need to go in and under the lifespan settings, which you'll find at the top here. There we go. You need to put lifespan PP only. So now if we go back and play, they'll simply live for 2 seconds and then they'll die. You can see them here dying off around here. Now the problem is, if we decide to change the speed these are falling, or some of them fall faster than others, and I'll give you an example of why this could happen. If you have an interaction with another object, let's say, let's put in a small polygon plane here, and we'll just move this down and we'll scale it a little bit. And what I want to do is make our nParticles collide with this. So some of our particles will collide with this and some of them will pass straight through. Now this leaves us with the problem that as our particles are dying off after 2 seconds, they'll hit this and they'll take longer to reach the bottom of the grid, so they'll disappear inside the fluid container before they actually hit the bottom, which will make for a very strange looking effect. So what I want to do is make them collide with this, so I can give you a practical example of a small piece of script you can write to combat this when you're dealing with particles and fluid containers, especially when you're dealing with particles that will eventually drop out of a fluid container, which is often the case. So here's our plane. I'm going to go back to nDynamics, and I just need to go to nMesh and create passive collider. So what I've just told this is to make this passive, which means if we put gravity or some other force in the scene, the wind like we used before, this won't actually be blown around by the gravity or the wind, but it will act as an object that other things can bump into. If I just hit play now, you'll see what I'm talking about when one finally hits it. There you go, you just saw one hit it there, and there's one that lands on it. So what happens is, in fact, if I'll just make this a bit larger, it will be a lot easier to see. So I'll just scale that up a bit. What happens is our particles are going to come out, they're going to hit our collider object, and then they're still going to disappear. They wouldn't do this. We want them to only disappear when they hit the bottom of this container. So a good way to do this, if we close this and we scroll back down to the per particle attributes, so we select our nParticle 1 object, go back down to the per particle 1 object, go for the lifespan, runtime before dynamic expression, which will actually override the creation expression we put in. And what we need to do is we need to store the location of each particle in a variable, so we can then tell Maya to make that particle disappear when it's at a certain distance. So the way we do this is we need to vector and then we'll need a variable name, so I'll call this fire B position equals, and then we need to say, I'll just copy this from here. Actually, I can just type position. Okay, so this is going to store the position of the n particles in this particular variable. What we need to do then is assign another variable with just the y position, because I'm going to want this to drop, to disappear when it reaches a certain point on the y-axis. So we'll just call this, we'll just call it y position equals fire B pos dot y. So now this gives us the position of each individual n particle, and this variable here gives us the y position. It's just a quirk in Maya syntax that we can't just jump straight to finding this out. So now what we need to say is if, let's see, if the y position so is greater than, let's say 5, because this box is 10, so 10 units tall, so we know it was created halfway down the grid, so the bottom of the box should be at -5. So what we need to do then is say kill off the particle, if you like, when it reaches -5 y units. So if it's -5 y units, we want it to die. And this is simple enough to do. You just give it a lifespan pp equals 0, and then we just do this point. Okay, so it's a fairly simple thing. You're storing the position of your particle. If your position goes to y -5, then the lifespan equals 0. We'll hit create, and if you don't get any errors, you probably typed it in right. So we will now rewind, and I'll play. Oops, hang on, I think I've done something. Yes, that would be why. Just hit edit, and here we go. So now our particles are falling out, and they're still dying after 2 seconds. Let me just make sure that's not our creation expression that's affecting that. Okay, now as you can see, they fall into the container and they stay in the container until, of course, we go back to frame 1. What I need to do now is resize this so it's not so big, so we'll have some drop on it and some fall past it. And here we go. Okay, so the ones that actually hit something or take longer to exit the container stay within the container. If you look at this one here, it misses and it disappears as soon as it exits the container. Now, I'll make this smaller so we'll get probably a better example. Now, sorry to put you through the scripting, but it is quite important when you're dealing with fluids and dynamics in Maya to have a little bit of experience in scripting. Even for something as simple as this, it's very useful. It means that if you're doing an animation or a fluid effect, you can now tell n particles or anything else to disappear when it leaves the container simply by knowing where your container is in Maya space. So at the moment what we have is, I'll just tilt this a little bit, make it a little more interesting. What we have is n particles interacting with a fluid container in Maya and dying off when they reach the bottom of the container. In the next lesson, we're going to cover shading these so they start to look a bit more like smoke and fire. We'll also deal with some other issues that can crop up. So I hope to see you for that part, and thanks for watching. Okay, welcome back. In the last part, this is where we left off. We left off with our n particles falling through our scene and dropping through our grid. There we go. Sorry, something just went a bit wrong with my simulation, but there we go. Happens sometimes. Right, so our n particles drop through our scene and die off. What we want to do now is we'll get rid of this because in this particular instance We're simply using it for demonstration purposes. So now you should see all of these fall down and just drop out the bottom of the container and disappear. Okay, so first things first, we're going to go into the shading of these to get the smoke trails nice, because at the moment, if we render it, it'll look fairly horrendous. You just see a white line on the screen, pretty much. There we go. It's not looking a lot like smoke, but as you can see, we are having each one of these end particles is acting as a separate emitter. If I actually just get a couple in the shot, you'll get a better view. There we go. And you can see the smoke trail that was left behind by a previous end particle. So first off, before we dive into shading, I want to use some external force on this, because in the video I will show you. If you remember, our fire wasn't falling straight down. It falls kind of, oops, sorry, my email has just popped up. It falls kind of in a diagonal line, which is sort of how I would envision fire falling from the sky, and that's what I'd like to create here. So same as we did in a previous tutorial, we're going to use an air field to create some randomness in the way this falls, to get it to blow in a more diagonal line than just a straight down falling pattern. So I'm going to do this by going up to, on the dynamics menu set, fields, and just dropping in some air. I'm going to actually reset the settings of this, and I'm going to call this wind. Create this. I'll just move it out the way here. Okay, and if I hit play now, of course nothing will happen, because we haven't yet connected our wind to our emitter. So we want this wind to affect both the end particles and the fluid container. So we'll do this by clicking this, control selecting the end particle emitter, and going up to fluid effects, going up to fields, and using effect selected objects. So if I just rewind this now and hit play, you'll see, if I turn this round, that we're having an effect, a slight effect on our end particles. What we need to do is go up and set our wind field a little better. So this is currently set to Y, so it's actually blowing them up, so they're falling slightly slower. If I set this to 0, I'll set this to 1, and I'll go up to a magnitude of, let's say, 5. Again, this is all personal preference. You can have the wind blow in whatever direction you would like. You can have as much or as little wind as you want. So let's just see what this has done for us when I hit play. Okay, now we're definitely falling diagonally down. So this is more matching the video that we just saw. Now what I'll do is I will actually move the emitter, the end particle emitter, over here. And we'll just try this now. And yeah, you can definitely see these are falling in a sort of diagonal pattern. If you wanted them to fall more along that way, you can select your wind here, or your air, and give it a magnitude of, let's say, 10. And now you'll see they have a much more diagonal movement to them. Okay, but our smoke is still going fairly upwards, so if we select again our wind, and then we select our fluid, and join those together too, to affect selected objects, when we play now, you'll see that both the particle and the smoke stream is going in a more diagonal direction. It's also being pulled in this diagonal direction, which is an effect that I quite like. So now we have an external force, we have some end particles, we have our fluid container. What I'm going to do, just to give us a bit more variation, is I'm going to resize this particle emitter, so this way we'll get particles coming towards the front of the camera and towards the rear. If we do this from a top view, you can probably see it better. So when we get this in shot, it will look a lot more 3D. We'll have some fiery rain or meteorites that look further away than others, which is why we're using a 3D container and not a 2D container. Now, your smoke trail has got a lot of problems with it. It doesn't look like smoke. It's very jaggedy. This will come down to the resolution of our fluid container. Problem is, because we're now using a 3D fluid container, if I was to up this resolution to, say, 100, and then replay this, you'll see that all of a sudden it's very slow. So this is a trade-off, and this is a quad-processed machine. It's quite a fast machine. So, this is going to be a trade-off between the quality that you want to see and what you can get away with. I mean, you don't want to be here for 3 weeks rendering this out or simulating it. So, for practical purposes at the moment, I am just going to stop this and give it a resolution of, say, 40. That should give us a more general idea of what our smoke is going to look like without taking, such an incredibly long time to do. So when I push play again now, you'll see that it's a lot faster. You'll also see that my emitter, because it's emitting slowly, doesn't actually emit the first particle until around frame 38. So, as with higher resolutions, you've seen how slow this was to simulate. We don't actually want to simulate these first 38 frames every time we do this. Now, if you'll remember, we used an initial state with the fluid on a previous tutorial. We're going to do exactly the same thing with this nparticle. So what we're going to do is go to the nDynamics menu set. We're going to hit nsolver, initial state, and we're going to hit set from current. Now when we rewind, you'll see we're at frame 1, but our particle stays there. So as we play, now you can see that by the time we're at frame 23, it's already halfway through the box, instead of having to simulate those first 35-40 frames to get absolutely nothing. So, and as I've upped the resolution, you can see that our smoke is acting more like smoke. Problem is, it's getting trapped in the top of the box here, and I think our smoking meteorites, I want this smoke to dissipate a lot faster. So that's the first shading thing that we're going to take care of. We're going to select our fluid container, and I'm not using temperature or fuel at the moment, so they're both off. That's fine. We want to go down to the shading. And what we want to do at the moment, we have our smoke on this constant color, so I'm going to turn that black. And if we replay now, you'll see we just have this black smoke. Okay. If later on we're going to be using this for our, in fact I'll just flick that on to density, and now you can see that we have kind of a more funky effect. But still it's not dissipating fast enough. So what we want to try and do, and also where the density is highest, at the head of this, we want it to look like smoke, to look like fire, sorry. And what's happening here, this orange is where the density is not so high. It's on the middle of this incandescence ramp. So if we were to say move this up here till it went black, and then we'll put another one in here just by clicking, click there to get it larger, we can start to build up some smoke color. In fact, what I've done here is selected the wrong one, so this one should be black and this one should be white. So we're kind of building up some smoke color here. It still doesn't look perfect, but we're getting more of a smoky, fiery trail. But the first problem I want to take care of is just the dissipation of this density, because it's not looking too hot at the moment. So what I want to do is go up to our content method, content details, and under density I'm just going to turn the dissipation. I'm going to try a value of, say, 2.5. It's quite a high dissipation value because we want this to dissipate fairly quickly. So if we press play now, okay, that's sort of a little bit more what we want. It's not quite dissipating fast enough to my tastes. But you can see we've started to make more fiery comet-like trails, or meteorite-like trails already. And if I just stop here and take a quick render, you'll see that we do have some dissipation towards the end here, but probably not enough. But for now that will do. I'm going to add a little swirl into this whole thing. So under velocity, I'm going to add a swirl of 20, let's say, to see how we get on with that. Okay, and now I'm creating more swirl. And you can see our smoke trails have got a lot more detail into them. Another way you can bring more detail into your smoke trails is by going to the shading, and under texturing you can hit the texture incandescence and texture color. We'll go over to this when we start with a bit more advanced shading, but for now, if you just turn the frequency ratio up to 4 and resimulate this, you'll see towards the end of my smoke trail here, I start to get a little more detail, not a lot, but you know, that's also to do with the resolution, but we're going to combat this as we go along. So right now we're still really not using a high enough dissipation for the smoke trails. I can add more dissipation, or I can go up to the density tab and turn the density scale down. I don't think I'll do that. I think I'll actually turn it up to 1. Okay, and still not enough dissipation, so might just select the emitter itself here under the end particle, the fluid emitter, and what I'll do is I'll change the density voxels per second to 5, and that's helped a little bit, but still not dissipating quite enough, so I'm still going to need to tweak that dissipation. Back to the fluid container, and I'll put a dissipation of, say, 3.5. We'll also try a diffusion of 0.2, which will help diffuse out the fluid a little bit. And here we go. Okay, now I'm getting better dissipation, but still I have fairly bad smoke here. So we're going to concentrate on some shading for our smoke now. So I'll take a quick render of this, and you can see I want a lot more detail in this smoke, and also want a lot more color variation in it as well. And I'm just going to select my camera a minute and change my background color, because what we want is black smoke, like it's very hot, oil rich, kind of dirty fire. So on a black background, obviously that's not the best way to view this, so I'll go down to environment on my background and just change this to grey, and I'm getting no black smoke at all. I'm getting this light grey smoke, and what I would like is black smoke here fading towards light grey here. So again, we go back to our fluid container, and under the shading attributes, what we need to do is tweak our opacity ramp here. So if I want a bigger value of black, what I can do is click here. I'll click here to bring this up better, and I'll just turn this black, and you can see here that now we start to get a little more black smoke in our scene, but it's not much variation. So if I were to put another one here, give us that nice black, and then change this color here to, say, a darker grey, I can start to build up some variation in my smoke to get the effect that I'm looking for. Can also change the input bias of both this and this to 0.4, and now we have a lot more black, but we have too much other smoke in the scene. So if I just minimize these a minute, and we can tweak our opacity ramp now, you can see I can get rid of that extra smoke simply by making this end of the spectrum more opaque. So I don't want to see too much of that, and less of that, and probably more of this dark black color here. So you can use, like I said the previous time, your opacity ramp and your incandescence ramp in conjunction with each other to start to get a basic rough out of the shading effect that you want. Okay, this is getting more like what I want, but now there's way too much black, so it's just a case of tweaking these values a little bit to get the effect that you're looking for. So you might want to mix and match a bit. I'm going to go to this one, make this one a slightly lighter grey. Now I have too much grey, so I'm going to make this a bit darker probably, There we go. And by using this, you can create a lot of different sort of texture within your smoke. If I make this one lighter, all of a sudden you can see that I've added some extra definition to this. So when we render again, we slowly but surely start to build up something that looks a little more like smoke. And we'll get more into this when we go into the shading of the fire. You can obviously play with your input biases here to tweak your effect even more. And your input bias here, you might need to add some more colors, rearrange some colors around your smoke. I don't think this one here works terribly well, so we'll make that maybe a bit darker even. Going towards here, pull it up, pull this one up a little, maybe make that slightly lighter so we can see more of our trailing smoke. And when we add fire and fuel to this as well, this will be on fire. So you'll just get a black edge around the fire, and hopefully we can build up these layers of shading and get our smoke and fire looking somewhat realistic. Okay, in the next part we're going to cover the smoke and fire. We're going to up the resolution a little bit. In fact, I'll take a play blast of this now at a slightly higher resolution. We'll go to 75, so you can see what it looks like, what we have so far, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, welcome back. I've done a quick play blast so you can see what we've got so far, and as you can see, our balls are flying through our container with what looks like some smoke trails, although not particularly good ones as yet. But if we compare that to the effect we're going for, you can start to see we're building this first layer up of black and grey smoke. So in the next part we'll continue with the shading, and I hope to see you for that. Thanks for watching. Okay, welcome back. In the last part we managed to create some basic smoke trails for our flaming meteors here. As you can see, what we're going to concentrate on now is getting our shading a little better and adding some fuel and heat to the equation. So first off, I'm going to select my fluid container, and at the moment temperature and fuel are turned off. I'm going to turn them both to dynamic grid, and then I'm going to select my fluid emitter here, which is actually a subsection of our particle emitter, and I'm going to give this a heat value of say 40 and a fuel value of 20. We might tweak these as we go along, but we'll see what this does for us to start off with. I'm also going to go to my fluid container, go down to the shading section, and I'm going to flick this. Now we've had to play with the incandescence on density. I'm going to flick it to temperature, and I'm going to hit play, and we'll see what happens. Now straight away you can see we've got fire, but our smoke has kind of disappeared. It's all fire at the moment. If I was to take a render of this, you'll see that it doesn't have much detail to it. It's just one long yellow trail, which again looks nothing like our video here, where we have some nice texturing within the fire. We have some various mix of colors, so we're going to aim to get that now. So here we are. This is all obviously towards this end of the spectrum now. This is set to temperature. What we want is to have this temperature dissipate quite rapidly, leaving us with a trail of smoke as opposed to a trail of heat. So again, we go up to our contents details section, which is here. We want to go temperature. I'm going to set first the dissipation to 4.5, and we'll resimulate and see what that's done for us. Okay, as you can see, it's dissipating a lot faster, and now we're coming with some black smoke towards the end of the trail, which is more the effect we're looking for. But I want this fire to bob up and down, so I'm going to set the buoyancy to 6, and if we resimulate, you may be able to see that. You'll probably see it better when we animate it later. but you can see this tail end now sort of dies off and then flares back up a bit. So that's one way that we're going to get this smoke effect. I'm also going to turn the diffusion up a little bit to say 0.5 to make it more diffuse. So what we'll get is we'll get an even more pronounced effect and a slightly smaller flaming tail. I'm going to set its temperature scale to 0.8, which will get rid of some of the yellow and give us a few more colours within our shape here. As you can see, we're getting a lot more oranges and a lot more reds. So we start to build up these layers of temperature and fuel, and if I go down to fuel, I might turn the reaction speed actually down to 0 and the ignition temperature to 0.1. I'll also turn the fuel scale down a little bit to 0.9, and we'll see what this gives us. Okay, so now we're getting a much nicer pattern of smoke and fire here, and in fact if I just resimulate to a frame and render this for you, and we'll go here and we'll hit render. As you can see, I'm getting a much nicer pattern of these yellows and oranges. Our resolution is not high at the moment because we're simulating, so when I turn the resolution up you'll see a lot more detail. One annoying thing at the moment is you can still see this blue N particle blob here, so we'll get rid of those. We'll just select our N particle and we'll hit Control H for hide, and now we won't be able to see it. We'll still see the effect that the N particle gives us, i.e. it will still be an emitter, you just won't see the blue N particle blob anymore. Okay, so we're kind of getting there. What we need to do is concentrate on our fire shading a little bit more. So we'll scroll down, and what we have here is, obviously this is very hot because of our fuel fire reaction, so it's at this end of the scale. What we need to do is we'll bob this out, and we have too much yellow, I think, so I'm going to move the yellow here. I'm going to click here to get me another swatch, and I'm going to turn this swatch to a much lighter yellow, so we introduce some white, maybe even a little lighter than that, and then when I replay you'll start to see we're getting some white flecks here, and in fact if I render this now you'll see a much broader range of colour. Okay, so now we've got some white hots, some yellows going towards orange, and this looks a bit blurry and a bit washed out simply because of the resolution we're using. We'll also be adding some more details with the texture in here in probably the next lesson. But one thing I would like to show you, this was 5-second render with Maya software. If we render this with Mental Ray, it will be 2 seconds. It's substantially faster in a lot of cases to render fluids with Mental Ray, so bear that in mind. If you're taking a long time to render out your fluids, you might want to flick over to Mental Ray and give that a try. So we need to continue tweaking this, and the smoke trail is not very impressive. Let's have a look at that. So what we've got here is really not what we want, so if I just minimize this, and I can sort of get this a bit darker, maybe to here, and I might flick the input bias of my opacity ramp up a little bit. So if I re-render this now, we'll keep the old one. I've got a much more pronounced smoke trail, which I am actually looking for in this instance. So if we continue to add detail to our smoke, what we want to do is we'll go up to our temperature here and add some turbulence, say a turbulence of 6 and a noise of 0.15. And these values are based on experience, they're based on playing around. The best thing to do with your smoke and fire is just continue to tweak these values until you get the effect that you're looking for. So now when I hit this, play, I'll just re-render this and we'll see what we can see. Okay, now I'm starting to get a little bit more noise, and I think I want a little bit more swirl as well. So I'll go to the velocity tab and put the swirl up to maybe 25. Okay, and I will just retake a shot of that. And re-render. Okay, so now I'm getting much more of a smoke and fire effect that I want, and this is frame 18. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crank up the resolution just to show you the difference to 200, and I'll take another shot of this. You'll see a lot more detail, but when the resolution goes up, you'll also going to need to tweak the shading. So I'm just going to pause for this because it will take a moment to simulate, so I'll see you in a second. Okay, welcome back. After taking a shot at higher resolution, here's the lower resolution, looks slightly blurry, and you'll see this starts to get slightly sharper. This was at 40, this was at 75. For the final thing, we'll go up to 200, and that's where we'll get a lot of this noise and kind of differential in the smoke from, as well as some extra tweaking we'll do now. But just to show you, when you do change the resolution, you may have to tweak your shading again a little bit. So what we'll do now is I'll just rewind that, and we'll go back to our shading. Now, one of the things I didn't really like is how the fire stays quite constant even with a high buoyancy. So we're going to try and get around this. We'll add a little bit more noise, so I'm going to put that to 0.3, and I'm also going to keyframe this temperature scale. So at frame 1, I want my temperature scale on 0.8, and we'll set a key for that. And what I'll do is I will then go to, say, frame 20. I'm just going to do this at random and go 1.2 and set a keyframe, and then say up to frame 70, and I will hit the temperature scale at around 0.5, set a keyframe, go here, put this at 1, set a keyframe here, 0.8, set a key up to here, 1.4, 1.7, let's say. Let's do a big flame out, and then here we'll put it back to 0.8 and set the key. These are just random values I'm poking in at the moment. You can obviously tweak around with this and see what works for you, but this will give us a little bit more variation in our scene and our fire. As you can see, as it gets towards the 0.8 there, you get a much larger flaming scale. So that just gives us some variation within the scene. So right now we're getting towards what sort of the look we want. Let's just tweak this a little bit, get this to where we can actually render it, and I'll take a quick render of this. Okay, so that's given us more of a fireball effect, and I might just turn my input bias here down to 0.4 was a good value, I think. Let's see this one. Maybe that will get rid of some of the black outline. No, I think 0.4 was a pretty good value for both. And I'm going to go to my texture settings. And what the problem is that the texture is not moving on this, so what I want to do is, okay, in order to get our texture to move, what we need to do is go down to the texturing section and just put equals time times 0.1, and this will then make our texture move depending on the frame of the animation. So this will give us more swirl pattern, this will give us a better looking fire effect. So I'm just going to render this smoke cloud out now and have a look. I'm still not liking this. I like the tail, I like the fire. Obviously with more resolution it's going to look a lot better, but I don't like this light grey smoke that's left behind. So if we go back to our texturing, and I'm going to use my opacity ramp, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to have more of that and a lot less of that. So as you can see, this opacity ramp, very handy for tweaking your overall effect. And I'm going to take a look at this and hit render again. Okay, and I've kind of got the flaming fireball effect I was going for here. It could probably use some tweaking here. I think I might change this from a pale yellow to a very pale blue. I get some white hot flame in there, and we'll just re-render, see what sort of variation we get. Okay, I think if we zoomed in, you'd see this maybe a bit better. Okay, yeah, I can see certain patches of blue here. This is still maybe needs tweaking with our opacity ramp. Let's just... Okay, that's not doing a lot for us. I want to pull down these higher ends of the spectrum maybe. Just go to sort of here. Okay, that's killed a little bit of it. And again, it's just a case of maybe putting a few more variations of color in here. So maybe I'll go with a kind of red, maybe a little bit too red. Actually, let's just make that a darker kind of orangey, browny red. Okay, let's try that. Okay, I'm not really liking that much, to be honest. I'll move this down here a bit, and the change between this color and this color is a little too pronounced, so I'll go up to maybe a more brown with a bit more saturation, I think. I'll try this again. Okay, yeah, that's given me some variation of color, and what you've got to think about is this is all going to be moving and wobbling around, so I like this variation. I might just go and drop the fuel scale to 0.6, I will try, and I'll need to resimulate for that to frame 24. Okay, frame 25, that'll do. Okay, yeah, I'm kind of liking the effect we've got here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a quick play blast of this so we can see where we are at the moment, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, my play blast is finished. If I hit play now, you will see we get a flaming meteorite-like effect. Now, if you wanted to create fire and smoke on the ground, you can do it this way. You can do it with two emitters, one for smoke and one for fuel. What we're trying to touch upon here is the basics of Maya's fluid system to get you started. I will be doing an advanced fluid or a more intermediate fluid course next month, so if you enjoyed this one, I hope you stick around for that one, and I'll see you in the next part of this tutorial where we'll continue with our smoke and fire meteorite effect. Thanks for watching. Hi, welcome back. In the last part we left off here with our smoke and fire balls coming through our container. Now there's a few extra things we can do for the shading of these. For instance, I can go here. If I just render this, you'll see what we have. Again, the resolution is quite low, so what we can do to help this along a little bit without just increasing the resolution is if I go here and I look under texturing, which will be here, and I hit inflection, and I'll save this and re-render. You'll see this has given us a much more kind of natural flame feeling, and all the minute details will come when we up the resolution. So you can hit inflection. You can also play with your opacity ramp a bit. Our smoke here is fairly one colored, so again we can make this a bit darker up here, possibly add another color swatch here and just go a lot lighter, so you can start to see that we get a build-up of more layers of smoke. As you can see, we've already gone from this to this. Again, we could play with the top end of the color ramp here, adding let's say a more brownish color, and this will help with the blend between this and this, which is now a little better. And I was going to go through some more tweaked attributes again with the opacity ramp. We could try and get this to blend a little better, but I think we've given you enough of the basic idea of fire and smoke now for you to go ahead and create your own. I will do another quick play blast here, just so you can see what this looks like with the inflection turned on, and I'll just zoom in a bit and do a play blast. Okay, my play blast is finished, and if you look at what we have here, it sort of matches the video I initially showed you. What I'll do is I'll include the scene file for this part. I'll also include the scene file for the actual video that we showed. You'll see they're both pretty matched up. The only difference being is I've spent a little more time tweaking these two. And again, I could show you that here, but it's just things you already know. You're going to have to take it from here yourself and start introducing your own colours and to get the sort of effect you're looking for. Now, in the next part, we'll be taking a look at actually sculpting fluids along geometry, which should be very interesting, and I will see you for that. I just wanted to let you know before I go that for the final render of the video that you saw, which I'll bring up now, I used a base resolution of 120, which is why we have better pattern of smoke and fire as compared to our render for this one, but that is simply fluid resolution. So again, I'll include this scene file for you to play with, and hopefully between what we've just discussed here and the settings in that scene file and this file, you'll have pretty much got a good grasp of how to do your smoke and fire. In the next part, we'll be creating something a little more like this, which is fluid following a set path. And you'll notice about a quarter of the way into this, we have a big plume of smoke here, which is created by a big plume of fire effect here, which is created by a fuel emitter on its own. So hopefully you'll find that interesting again, and thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next part. Hi, welcome back to our SimplyMaya tutorial on fluids. So far we've looked at 2D fluid containers, 3D fluid containers. We've looked at emitting particles, fluids, via standard emitters. We've looked at using nparticles to help us with our fluids, and now we're going to take a look at geometry, specifically emitting fluids from geometry. There's many variety of uses for this. I'm going to show you one, and again I'm going to use my SimplyMaya logo image. So the first thing I want to do is bring that image into the scene so I can start to work with it. So I'm just going to select a simple polygon plane. I'll go up here, I'll rotate it 90 degrees in X. I'll just zoom in a little bit. I'm going to make it a bit bigger, just for view, and over here to my front view where I'll make it a bit larger. I'm then going to assign a new material to it. So I'm just going to assign a Lambert. It doesn't really matter, I just want to get my image on there. So just load in my image plane here, which is under here, and as you can see it's just the same image I've used before. Press 6 on the keyboard for a shaded view, and what I want to do is I want to have my smoke and fire, or in this case I'm going to go for a kind of more funky plasma effect, as we've already done smoke and fire, and this whole tutorial is about showing you what's possible, not how to want to create one specific effect. So in any case, what I want to do here is have my plasma effect, my fire plasma effect, follow this logo from here and from here, so we get a nice trail of burning, fluid. And the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to flick over from dynamics to surfaces, and I'm just going to grab the EP curve tool, and I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to quickly draw around this. You don't have to be too precise. This is, after all, going to be on fire, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I'll just get rid of that one actually. Yeah, that's fine. Press return. You can see now I've got one curve. I'm going to make another curve now for this part of the logo. And as you can see, I'm just throwing this in. It doesn't have to be particularly precise. I think that might be a little bit too imprecise. Okay, and there we go. I've got two curves. What I'll do is I'll no longer need this, so I'll get rid of it. And you can see they're a bit, kind of resembles our SimplyMaya logo, so I'll just have a fix with this. I'll go up to Edit Curves, and I think I'm just going to smooth this out a bit. So what I'm going to do now is smooth the curve. I'm going to reset the tool so I'll have the same value as you, and I think I am actually going to give that a value of 20. So I'm going to hit smooth. There we go. And now we've got a nice smooth curve. I'll just do the same thing with this one. So edit curve, smooth curve, and there we go. That fixed a lot of sins for us. So what I have now is two curves in the shape of the logo. What I need to do is get geometry onto these curves, but also need to get the geometry on there in such a way that I'll be able to set fire to it and then have it crawl around the curve. So how I'm going to do this, I'm just going to use a simple NURBS circle. I am going to rotate that, let's see, 90 in Y, of course not X, sorry. Okay, just jump into my 4 view here, and also 90 in Z, and also 90 in Y. There we go. And I'm just going to resize this because I don't want particularly large geometry. Let's just zoom in here and let's take a look at that. I think that's still a little bit too large. Okay, that seems fine. I'm going to get rid of the grid in this view and this one, and there we go. I'm going to press W to move this down and move it to the start of my curve here. Again, we're not trying to be particularly precise. Things like smoke and fire, you're going to have a lot of movement within the smoke and fire itself, so you can, especially for this quick demonstration, get away with being maybe a little bit sloppier than you normally would if you were trying to get good topology with a model. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to push Control D to duplicate this now, and I'm just going to push it up here and then here, and I'm going to get another circle at the start of this curve up here. Okay, that will just about do it, I think. Now the reason I did this, I'll show you, is because I'm going to have geometry come from here and extrude out here. It's quite a simple thing to do. We select our circle, we select our curve, we go up to surfaces, extrude. I'll just tick the option box, and if I just reset this so you have the same as me, the only thing I'm going to do is set the curve range from complete to partial, and then when I hit extrude, I'll just do the same with this. So surfaces extrude, there we go. And the reason I use partial is because now I can go into here, select one of the subcurves, probably this one, and if I put this to 0.5, oh, I can see we have a problem there. So I'll just try this one. If I put this to 0.5, you can see that I can now animate this to move. So I'll do that now. In fact, I'll set the starting value as 0, and actually I'll set the starting value as 1. You'll get an error, but it doesn't matter for this purpose. We'll keyframe it. We'll put this up to frame 70. We'll set a starting value of 0. We'll set a min value of 0, and we'll key select it. And you'll see what happens now as I play this animation. I have geometry that loops round this curve. So when we use this as a surface emitter, we'll get a nice fire effect. We'll obviously hide the geometry, but we'll get a nice fire effect that follows this around. Now we need to find out what happened with this one. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to click here. I'm going to go to Edit Curves, and I'll probably reverse the curve direction. So now when I do this, hopefully we will find a slightly more cooperative curve. So I set this at 0.5, and there we go. So 0.1. So again, I can just give it the same values I gave this one. So what I think I'll do here is, if we look at the values I gave this, I gave it a value of 0 and then 1 on frame 70. So I'm going to do the same thing. Value of 0, value of 1. sorry, and then let's get back to where we were, shall we? So here we are. Okay, what have I done wrong here? I'm just going to delete our extruded faces, so extruded face 3, and I'll make sure this time we're on frame 0, of course, and I will then just extrude that again. Sorry, this is not something I do terribly often. So again, we'll go here and we'll set a value of 1, and then on frame 70 we'll set a value of 0. Key selected. We'll just go back and make sure we keep that. We did not, so a value of 1 and key selected. Right, now finally, there we go. So we've got our SimplyMaya logo. We're going to have to move it around a bit, but just turn the grid off. Okay, so I'll just let that run through, and I'm going to grab this, hit E for rotate, and I'm just going to rotate this a little bit more into place, and I'm also going to move it down a bit so we can get our logo looking a little better, and that looks fine for our intents and purposes. What I will do now is hide this lot and also group it. Control H to hide and Control G to group. Just double click to rename. I'll just call that curves. I will call this logo top, and rather unimaginatively logo bottom. So I like to keep fairly organized when I'm doing something like this. It just helps me when we start adding emitters to things. I can then see at a glance what emitter is supposed to be doing what. So there's the geometry we're going to actually use for our fire effect, and we're actually going to hide the geometry in the end as well. And what I'm going to do first off is just go to my dynamics, go to fluid effects, create 3D container, make sure this is reset, and just hit apply and close. So now I've got my 3D container. What I need to do is add some emitters, as you've seen before, but first off, this 3D container is probably a bit big, so in the Z direction I think I'll just scale it down to 5. That should give us enough space to work with, and the smaller the container, the less calculation Maya has to do, of course. We could use, there's a new feature in Maya 2011 called auto resize. I'll be going into that in the more intermediate fluids tutorial. It's not in Maya 2010, and I'd like you to be able to follow along with this if you're using Maya 2010. But just be aware, if you are using Maya 2011, you can click auto resize and have a play around with that. It will help speed up your simulation in a lot of circumstances. But for now, as we're not doing anything particularly complicated, I'm just going to go with this standard grid and no auto resize. Right, so first things first, we need to select our logo top piece and make it an emitter, or assign an emitter to it, I should say. So I'm going up to fluid effects and add edit content, emit from object. We want to make sure this is a surface emitter, and for the density I'll just have 1. In fact, I'll just completely reset this, so I'll call this logo top emitter, and I'll just give it a density of 1, a heat of 0, and a fuel of 0, a 0.25 fluid drop off. And what I'm going to do is just hit apply and close. Oh, of course, well, you also select your geometry that you want to use as a surface emitter, but you also have to select your fluid container. So I'll just control select those two and apply and close. And what you'll see now is, if I put this on a shaded view, of course, and I think I'll also up the resolution so we can get a better look at what's going on. 50 should be fine for this. And when I hit play, you'll see that smoke is being emitted from this geometry. Okay, so now we'll just go through the same process with the logo. Oh, well, that's a great naming convention I have myself there. Sorry about that. I've actually named them the wrong way round for some strange reason. So I'll just now rename these before it gets a bit confusing. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Let's just make sure we have the right parts for the right ones. So here we go. I have logo bottom, yes. Logo top, yes. And now I'll need to just rename this emitter as well to keep things nice and organized. Okay, we need to assign an emitter to our logo top here, so it's fluid effects, add edit contents, emit from object. This will give us the same values we used last time. I'll just rename it to bottom, hit apply and close. Again, making sure we select the fluid container. And now you'll see that both of these objects are being used as surface emitters. So we can now, as we no longer need them for reference, we can now go ahead and hit Ctrl H and hide those. And now when I hit play, you'll see the SimplyMaya logo spin out the spoke. Of course, there's a long way to go with this to get it to the stage of our plasma effect. But you can already begin to see, maybe if I just up the resolution a little bit to say, we'll go for 100, and now I play this again, you can begin to see the logo take shape, and the way we use this animated extrusion as a sort of fluid sculpting method to sculpt this fluid into the shape of the SimplyMaya logo. When we come back, we'll take a look at shading. We'll also take a look at using a fuel emitter to get a nice small explosion to go off here where the round dot in the SimplyMaya logo would be. We'll also shade this fire and shade this plasma effect thing we're going for. We'll add some glow and basically we'll make it look nice. So I hope you enjoyed this part, and we'll see you in the next part. Thanks for watching. Hi, welcome back to our Maya Fluids tutorial season. In the last part, this is where we got. So you can see our fluid coming in here, and if your background color is different to mine, I've put mine to black so it's easier to see. You can change this with Alternate and B, and it will just cycle through your viewport colors. Anyway, so this is what you should have so far, which is our logo flaming in from this geometry here and this geometry here. A problem is at the moment we have too many emitters. I'll probably won't even end up using these emitters. I'll use them on a separate effect, which I'll show you in a little while. So just so we can see what we're doing, I'm going to actually turn these emitters off. I find it's easier when you've got lots of emitters in a scene. Sometimes it's easier to turn some off so you can actually get an idea of what each emitter is doing separately before you add another one. So at present we should just have these two emitters, and if I rewind and hit play, it looks like nothing is happening. This is simply because if we select our container and we go down to shading, as you can see we have our color here on black, and this is set to density. So I don't really want a smoky-like effect in this particular tutorial. What we're going for is something that more looks a little bit like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flick both of these to temperature, and then I'm going to go under my emitter settings and remove the density and just add heat instead, and I'm going to use a value of 5 to start off with. We may end up tweaking this. So, and then I'm going to go to my container and I'm actually going to just turn off density altogether because I won't be using it for this particular simulation. So now if I hit simulate, you'll see as our geometry starts to come in, it emits this orangey yellow pattern that we have here. First thing we need to do is we'll take a quick render. and I'm actually going to render with mental ray because it's somewhat quicker for fluids. That's Maya vector. Sorry, it's forgotten my mental ray once again. So I'll go here and Maya to mental ray. I'll just load that in from the plugins menu. And there we go. So as you can see at the moment, we don't have that ghost-like plasma sort of gaseous effect that we were going for. So the first thing I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to make the whole container a little larger. So I'm going to scroll up here. I'm going to keep the base resolution at 50. I'm just going to make the container a bit larger to give myself some more space to work with. So I'll need to obviously make my geometry a bit larger here. So I'll go to the channel box and just set its scale to 2.5, 2.5 and 2.5. And I'm going to do the same with the other piece of geometry. 2.5, 2.5 and 2.5. And if we rewind now, we'll play. Okay, that's given me a little better result. This will really help as we get more ethereal looking, more towards kind of a plasma effect, I said, instead of this solid color. So if I go back to the settings here, we'll begin with our shading. And at the minute I'm using no density, I'm also using no fuel, so I'm just going to turn those off so Maya doesn't bother to calculate them, because there's no need for right now. We will be using fuel later to do that explosion sort of effect that comes out of the middle. So the first thing I want to do is get this looking a little more see-through. So without touching my color, I'm just going to put the input bias to 0.4, which will make it a little overall brighter, as you've seen. And I'm going to start tweaking my opacity ramp. So, okay, we have something like this, and I can start to see some black come through here. And what I think I'll do is I'll just zoom in a bit, so when we do take a render of this, we get more of a better look, and I'll just keep that. So what I need to do is go down to where it's texturing, and I want to texture the incandescence, and I want to texture the opacity. I want to move the texture over time, so it's just time times, let's say 0.1. We don't need to move it a great deal. And also I want to take a look at my lighting here and click on self-shadowings and turn off use real light. Any of these settings you're not sure about, you can find them by thumping F1 on your keyboard and looking up under the help. My intention with this tutorial is more to give you a practical example, a demonstration, so you can actually see what happens when we tweak these, as opposed to giving you quite a long boring lecture on what each one does. If you do have any questions, you can always ask on the forum at SimplyMaya.com, and we will now continue with our shading here. Let's just take a quick render and see what we've done for ourselves so far. Okay, so as you can see, we've gone from this blobby looking thing to more patches of bright, but we're still not very see-through. So we're going to go now, and under the content details, we're going to start tweaking temperature, because that's what we're using. I'm going to have a temperature scale of 3, which if I just this, you can see what that does for us here. So I'm going to want a bit of dissipation. So I'm probably going to use a dissipation of around 0.2. I'm also going to set a little bit of turbulence here, so 0.4 maybe. And I'm just going to play this back and see what it looks like now. Okay, I can see a lot of fluid going upwards. This is not enough dissipation for me, so I might set this to 0.5. and that will help dissipate our fluid a little bit more. Okay, now it's not shooting straight up in the air. We're still getting a lot, but I'm going to correct that with some shading details. So I'm going to go down to the shading here, and what I'm going to start to do is maybe add some more color to this. So you move this down to halfway. I'll stick this here, and instead of a yellow, I think I might want to go with a bluish sort of color. So you'll see that blue color come in here. kind of start to mix with our other colours. Let me just take a quick render of this to see what that looks like. Okay, we're getting there. We still don't have that transparency we're looking for, but we're going to address that in a moment. First things first, I just want to go up to the dynamic simulation, turn on high detail solve to all grids. This is going to make us a bit slower, but it will give us a more high detail solve for the whole flame effect. So let me just have a look here. What we need to do is turn the transparency down a little bit, I think, and maybe we'll keep the transparency up. Maybe we'll do instead, we will make this a little bit lighter, and I'll show you what that's done for us. It's made it a lot more glowy and a lot more washed out, which is sort of what we're going for with this see-through sort of plasma gaseous look that we're trying to achieve. So now the next thing I want to look at is more shading options, because we have something here that's not giving us that see-through quality, and if you can see by tweaking our ramp a little bit we can sort of get more of that. Okay, I'm also now going to tweak the transparency a little bit, so we'll put this down, and again you'll see what this does for us. This should start to give us that more kind of transparent ghost-like look we're going after. Maybe a little more. Now, I'll just re-render that. Small changes to this transparency can actually make quite a big difference. For instance, if I was to put this here and go again, you'll see that now we've gone, quite a bit more towards the transparent. Just that tiny change from here to here made quite a bit of difference. So when you're playing with this, you should bear in mind that really small changes can make a really huge difference. For instance, if I lift this from here to here and then render, you'll see quite a difference. So as I say, bear in mind that small changes are going to make a large difference. If you can't get exactly the look I've got here, don't worry about it. This is supposed to be a creative, imaginative effect. This is not supposed to be photorealistic, obviously. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a quick render of this. Just want to double check all my settings here. So I have my high detail solve turned on. I don't have anything I don't need. A base resolution of 50 will do it for this, I think. Okay, that's looking fine. I like the transparency. I'm going to play with this color ramp a bit to get a better effect. But first thing, I'm going to just take a quick render of this for you guys, so you don't have to, save you a bit of work, and we can see what it is that we have so far with our effect here. So I'll see you in a moment. I'll just take the render. Hi. Okay, so I've taken our render, our animation of this, and we can see what we've got so far. So I'm actually really liking the color of this. I like the see-throughness. I'm not happy about all of this up here. I can see that we don't really have enough swirl, I think, so we're going to go ahead and add some velocity swirl. A few other things that need tweaking. This is still kind of fiery looking, which personally I like, but you can tweak the colors here a little. If we just take a render here at, let's do a render at frame 40. So I'll just let this play up to frame 40. There we go, 41, close enough. And we take a render. Okay, I can see this. What I want to do is introduce maybe a little different color. So under the shading tab, I'm gonna, this blue I like, this yellow I like, this orange I'm not too sure about. If I made this something radically different so we could see a complete contrast. There you go. Now I've got more of a sort of science fiction-y effect, which I'm not too wild about. Let me go back for an orange again. I quite liked it. Let's see, get more yellow in there. Sort of a little browny. Okay, let's try this. Yeah, I kind of like this color. I mean, you can tweak this. You can put as many different colors as you want in here. I can go here and say put in a green to give us some more variation in the color. So now you've got a greenish bluey yellow. In fact, I quite like that. As I say, we need more swirl here. So if I just go up to the velocity tab here, and we'll start with a swirl of 10, and we'll now have to resimulate. So I'll try and get that onto frame 41. Okay, frame 42, that will be close enough. Okay, and with the swirl, you can see I've got a different pattern. I'll simulate this up to one of the later frames to see what happens with the top of our fluid. Okay, this is a bit too swirly. Let me drop this down to say 4. Okay, and I'm also going to tweak my color again because I'm not liking this color much at all. So I'll just bring up my swatch box here, and I think I will go for back to a darker orange color. Oh, I'm at frame 1. That's not going to render anything at all. So I'll just stop here and hit render. Okay, yep, this I like. I'm happy with this. So we've gone from what looked like fire to what looks a bit more like I would envision a gas plasma sort of effect. We've just tweaked our opacity ramp, we've tweaked our incandescence, and all these shading, all these settings can be tweaked more, of course. We've textured the incandescence and the opacity. We've animated the texture across the number of frames, the time. We have turned off density and turned off fuel. In the next part of this tutorial, we'll be turning back on fuel, because what we'll want is a little sort of mini fuel bomb to go off here to represent the middle of our logo. We're also going to jump in and create a different effect with these two emitters here, which are currently turned off. So I hope this has given you a brief introduction of some of the different shading techniques you can use. Whereas in the meteorite flaming rain tutorial we created what looked like smoke and fire, here we're creating something completely different. So I hope that's given you some insight into the fact that Maya fluids are quite a versatile thing. Okay, we'll see you in the next part. Thanks for watching. Okay, welcome back. Here's where we left off with our plasma fire effect. What I want to do now is add the emitter that's going to make a big plume of fire or plasma. I'll show you what I mean now. I'll just bring up our example animation. Okay, if you watch our example animation, we get this big nice poof that represents the dot in the middle of the SimplyMaya logo that then vanishes. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a sort of fuel bomb emitter to do this nice poof with, and I'm going to do that now. So first things first, let's rewind this to frame 0. I'm going to unhide my logo top and bottom just so I can get an idea of where I should be putting my dot. My SimplyMaya logo dot should go around the middle here somewhere. Okay, so that's enough for me to see. So I'm going to select my fluid container, go to the dynamics menu and insert a emitter. I'm going to use this time, I'm not going to emit from an object. I'm just going to use a volume emitter with a fuel rate of, actually I'll reset this, so you have to set it to volume, and we want no density, we want no heat. We just want fuel, so I'm going to set this to 25, and I'm going to set it to be a sphere, so apply and close. Okay, there we have a fuel emitter, actually popped up in a pretty good location as well. So under my fluid 1 I have emitter 3, which I'm going to call fuel. No, I'll call that bomb, actually. Right, and I'll just press W to move it maybe a little bit more in the center. Let's get a, that's fine. So now what we need to do is zoom out a little bit and go to the attribute editor for our fluid container. We need to make sure fuel is turned on, because if it's turned off when we simulate, obviously nothing will happen. You can't see a big poof, big blast here. So I'm going to turn fuel to dynamic grid. I'm also then going to go down under the contents details and tweak the fuel a little bit. My reaction speed I want to set at 1. My ignition temperature I'll set at 0.1. My max temperature 100, and my heat released 100, my light released 1. And we'll play this back. And there we go, you can see our big plume. You can't see it very well at this fluid resolution of 50 in this display port, but if I just go back to hiding these, you will see that we get created when this heats up enough. All of a sudden there's a big plume, very rapid explosion. So that happens, let's just play this again. I can see that go up, I can see it start to set fire. That happens at around frame 20. So what I want to do is, because if I was to render this now, you'd just have a big plume pumping out fuel. Think about a leaking gas main into this simulation. So you'd get a great big crazy effect in the middle of your scene that I don't want. What I want is a big bang, sort of big release of heat all in one go, and then I want it to stop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set some keyframes for this bomb, as we've called it, emitter. So I'm going to key on frame 10, fuel voxel rate of 25%. Man, that might even be a bit high actually. I'm going to set that down to 10 and set its key. So now if I replay this simulation, you'll see a slightly less large reaction. There we go, it's taken effect. So by frame, I think around frame 30, we'll just have another look. It's actually caught light and exploded. So at frame 34, so at frame 24, I'm going to set this key, and at frame 40 I'm going to have none released, set key. So what this will do, if we take a look here, it will release 10, and then from frame 24 it will slowly go down to releasing no fuel. So now if we press play, you should see this catch and a big explosion happen, and then we've actually gone and released too much. So one way to stop fluid from being trapped by the top of this container is to go up to our fluid container, go up here and set the boundary to -y, and this way when our small explosion happens here, it'll go up and it will no longer be trapped by the top of the container, it will just pass straight through. But I think that's still too much of a reaction for me, so I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to look at these keyframes here. So we have from here to here. Yeah, I think I'm just going to delete this keyframe at frame 24, and then this will then start slowly releasing less fuel. So let's take a quick look at this now. Okay, that's kind of more of what I was hoping for, but we're still having fluid trapped by this container. Let's find out why. So fluid container 1, fluid shape, and the boundary for Y is, we'll just set this to none. Okay, and now it's just popping straight out the top. So that should about do the effect I'm looking for. Let's just take a quick render. That's kind of a turbulent fire effect. Let's just go down here and see if we can actually tweak the opacity for this a little bit, because we're getting a lot of orange that I don't really like so much. So I'm going to just tweak the opacity here, maybe pull it in a little here as well, and re-render. Okay, this has given me more of what I wanted to see. So you can also play around with the texturing. If I change this from Perlin noise to volume wave, for instance, you'll see a completely, well, not completely different effect, but a slightly different texture effect. So again, Perlin noise is quite standard, but just be aware you can play around with this. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. So in order for us to see this explosion in more detail and see what else might need tweaking, once again I'm going to render out a short movie clip of this, and we'll see what we can see. I'll just, before we go, under your shading, just set this to -y and set the edge drop off to 0.1, and I'll show you what this does. This is frame 87. I'll just capture this frame, save this frame, sorry, and set this to 87 so we make sure we land on the same frame. And then I'll take a render of this, and you can just see what this did for us. Okay, so make sure we've kept that. Okay, so it just lightened the whole thing down a little bit. Also, if I was to play this back on the simulation, you'd see the fluid drop off nearer the top of the container. Let me stop that. So, like I said, in order for us to see this properly and make sure a nice explosion has actually worked, we're going to take a quick render of this now. So I'll be back with you in a second. Okay, so I've finished that, and if we take a look at it here, what you'll see is we get our logo come in, we get our explosion, and then we get our fiery plasma effect at the end. So there's many ways you can shade this, there's many different things you can do with it. This is simply an example of using Maya geometry within inside a fluid container. I hope you found it interesting. Okay, so we're going to want to sort out that nice glowy effect, and you can do this in post-production, or indeed you can do it within Maya itself. So I'm just going to select the fluid container. I'm going to go up to its shape node, and I'm going to look for glow, which you should find here. I'm going to first off set my glow node up, because by default it will be set to auto exposure, and we don't want that, as I've already previously explained in another part. It's not so good when you animate. So I'll just bring up the hypershade here and select the glow node and set the threshold to 0.1, turn off auto exposure and set the glow intensity down to 0.1. And now I go back to my fluid, and now I can start tweaking my glow. So what we have is, say, 0.4 we'll start off with, and I'll take a render. Nope, not enough glow, so we'll try 0.8. Still not enough, let's try 1.2. Okay, that's enough, I think. Let me just go a few frames on. With the auto exposure turned off, we can get very heavy glow. There we go. Let me see if I have more of that later on. Okay, yeah, that's a lot too heavy. So again, try 0.8. This can be a little bit of a trial and error process to get this right. Okay, I think I like that. So I'm going to go ahead and leave those settings there. What I'm also going to do is I'm just going to scoot up here and turn my resolution up to 75. Make it 100. I'm also going to change my render settings just within Mental Ray. I'm going to render with Mental Ray, so you'll see pretty much the same, but just a little faster render. And the glow is more apparent under Mental Ray, so again we're back down to tweaking this thing. I would normally do the glow in post-production. I would normally do it with After Effects or a similar program. Just a little bit too bright. Sorry about this, folks, but we should just about nailed it now, I think. Okay, yep, that's perfect. I kind of like this little bit of glow. So I'm going to go ahead, and I've upped the fluid resolution. I'm going to go ahead and up the resolution in my render settings to something probably 1K by 1K, so I can render out a decent animation pass of this, and I will see you back here in 2.6. Okay, so I went ahead and just rendered that out. All I changed was, again, as I just said, I upped base resolution to 100, and that was about all really. I just set the render to a larger size, and here is our final effect with some glow. So as you can see, Maya Fluid's not just useful for the traditional smoke and fire. You can also get some very different effects with fluids. They're capable of a lot of things. We've covered simply a few of them in this tutorial. I hope you found it interesting, and thus concludes our basic fluid series. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to ask on the forum, and I hope to see some of your work online. Thanks for watching.